Sir Henry Winslip was the possessor of three remarkable things: wealth, title, and the desire for a haunted house. The first and second circumstances gave Sir Henry relatively little trouble. The fortune had to be spent regularly and replenished occasionally, and the worries associated with the title were, for the most part, limited to the timely ordering of new batches of business cards. Trying to get possession of any house with a good ghost took Sir Henry much more time and effort. To make the dream come true, Sir Henry got together with the clerk, Mr. Kix, a short, skittish man whose appearance was almost entirely composed of small, sharp features and whose only roundness was a bowler hat, which he parted with only before going to bed. Mr. Kix was engaged in his client's business with a diligence worthy of praise, searching, contacting, inquiring, pricing, examining. Only one small detail spoiled the impression of this activity. The desired house had not been found. This fact allowed Sir Henry to prolong his fruitful cooperation with Mr. Kix, leaving the scribbles on the checks for the clerk with the same regularity with which many of us keep diary entries. It is not as if there was no information about haunted houses at all. Mr. Kix followed every report with the utmost care, but every time it turned out either that the rumors of otherworldly visitors were exaggerated or that the house was not for sale, at least not for a reasonable price. Sir Henry was melancholy about this, and once confided to Mr. Kix that the prolonged search might soon enable him to have a spirit of his own in his house, the ghost of a considerable amount of capital that had been lost in the venture. Mr. Kix listened stoically to the tirade and appreciated the delicacy of his employer, who did not say a word about his role in the atrocity of the money. Whether it was the sighing of the soul described above, or simply a twist of fate, Sir Henry was disturbed a short time later by Mr. Kix's call. The clerk's voice trembled with excitement. "Found it. Consider yourself lucky, sir. The house is for sale with a real ghost in it." Sir Henry immediately demanded details. Mr. Kix's explanation revealed the following. The house was quite far away in the Tainshire, near a tiny village, unremarkable except for the surrounding marshes and heath. The present owner wanted to get rid of the property for trifling reasons unconnected with the ghost, who did no harm to the inhabitants of the house and was an infrequent visitor, appearing to observers once every 15 years, but certainly on a particular night. Sir Henry hesitated to make such a long-term commitment, for a simple calculation showed that the new owner would have to boast of the ghost rather than proudly display it to the public. Mr. Kix agreed that this should be taken into account, but observed that there was no choice. In the market, as they had both had occasion to see, Sir Henry's demand for ghosts far outstripped the supply. Besides, the next 15 years were at an end, the big night was at hand, and he, Mr. Kix, had already secured an invitation from the landlord for the two gentlemen, a visit that would not oblige them to anything, and even after seeing the ghost, the transaction might not take place. The terms seemed acceptable to Sir Henry. A fortnight later, Mr. Kix appeared, carrying an angular, skinny briefcase. Sir Henry, adjusting his leather cravats, seated himself at the wheel of his car, the shyster on his left, and the pair set off on the road. Sir Henry was a little nervous. Mr. Kix stoically endured the hardships of the journey, the engine snorting. The second hand in Sir Henry's vest pocket spun on its axis like an automobile wheel. "I beg your pardon, gentlemen," Sir Maximilian snapped. "Dinner will be cold. The maid does not sleep here. After it, you, Sir Henry, can walk here on your own, and your solicitor and I will discuss some details of my proposal." The tablet in the dining room was set for 3. There were 3 candelabras by the side of the table, though only one of them was burning. Sir Maximilian did not seem to speak at all. Sir Henry did not want to annoy his host with questions, and Mr. Kix was hungry and ate without distraction. After dinner, Sir Maximilian repeated that Sir Henry was free to look around the house as he pleased. Choose a bedroom at the same time. They are all equally ready for guests, Sir Maximilian added. Breakfast will be late. The maid will not be here before 9 o'clock. Unfortunately, we shall have to leave you before dawn, Sir Henry confessed. It's a long journey, and I have some business to finish tomorrow. And Mr. Kix, as far as I know, has to be in his room. Mr. Kix sighed sullenly, confirming what he had said. Well, Sir Maximilian said, glancing doubtfully at the table, then you will have to make do with the rest of today's dinner for breakfast. Sir Henry reassured him that they would do without a meal at all, saving half an hour for an early departure, and Mr. Kix sighed more sorrowfully in confirmation. Having lit the second candelabrum, Sir Henry set off into Anabasis, and left without companions quickly became convinced that his perceptions had changed. His senses were sharpened, and the sounds of strangers' footsteps and breathing were no longer drowned out by the house. The beams creaked, the chimney pieces gave a discreet groan, the drapes looked as if their edge had been loosened by someone's hand a moment before. Heels treading the stone floor gave birth to echoes returning from dark corners. Sir Henry gawked at the interiors, taking note of the little things that had escaped him on his first excursion. A dusty scarlet curtain hung on the ledge in the shape of a sword, making it look like a stream of blood flowing from a blade. A carved garland over the wood paneling hid laughing and weeping faces whose eyes looked like moving pupils in the glow of a candelabra. In the library, dust lay on a stack of newspapers, but a book with a horn star on its cover left on a table seemed to have been leafed through recently. Walking alone in the rooms, Sir Henry did not feel lonely. On the contrary, it was as if he were under someone's care. In the drawing room, Sir Henry glanced at the dial. He had been wandering for more than an hour. Standing at the window, Sir Henry put his face close to the glass. The branches outside were moving in the darkness. If I were a ghost, I could not wish for a better abode than this, Sir Henry murmured aloud and blanched. Preoccupied with the house itself, he had forgotten to ask his master about the ghost. What is it like? How does it manifest itself? Where exactly should he be seen, and should he be careful? Sir Henry hurried into the dining room. It was empty and dark. Apparently, Sir Maximilian and Mr. Kix had finished their negotiations quickly enough to leave. Chagrined, Sir Henry set about his search. He walked the corridors, looked in the library and study, even opened the door to the basement shaft, but the missing men were nowhere to be found. Most likely, both of them had gone to bed. Sir Henry wanted to check the bedrooms, but realized he didn't know which room belonged to the master. It was awkward to disturb Sir Maximilian too late, so he gave up the search. At random, he chose a room with an open door, and without undressing, he sank down on the bed on top of the covers and sank into his thoughts. It occurred to him that, unless his host had made special arrangements, the ghost must appear to his guest. As he pondered this, Sir Henry conjured up visions based on the books he had read until he dozed off. He woke up in the middle of the night. The candelabrum was burned out, and the room was dark. Sir Henry sat up jerkily in bed, disturbed by the sounds coming from the hallway through the gap in the loose door. With a sinking heart, Sir Henry rose to his feet and crept to the door jamb. A quiet rustling was approaching the room. Sweat broke out on Sir Henry's forehead. Looking around helplessly for an object to protect him, Sir Henry held his breath as the rustling reached its maximum strength and began to drift away. Someone or something had passed the room, heading down the corridor. After waiting a few seconds, Sir Henry touched the door, poked his head out, and froze. A vague silhouette floated away from him in the darkness. Sir Henry hesitated, then left the room and followed it cautiously, reassuring himself that the ghost must be quite harmless, as the clock had said. The pale silhouette flickered and went out. Sir Henry was startled, but realized that the corridor must be turning, and the phantom, if it had not passed through the wall, might simply have disappeared around the corner. Regretting that he had not brought his Bible with him, Sir Henry quickened his steps, reached, blinking hard, the end of the straight corridor and, turning, caught up with the stubby figure in a few steps. The apparition stepped into the sliced rectangles of vague moonlight that fell on the floor from the window, and Sir Henry recognized him. It was Sir Maximilian, dressed in an old nightgown. The landlord seemed embarrassed that Sir Henry had caught up with him. Without a word, Sir Maximilian turned away and disappeared behind the dressing room door. Sir Henry was embarrassed. He returned to his room, struggled to light the only lamp in the candelabrum, and by the light of its feeble flame, made his way to the dining room, where, as he remembered, there was another candelabrum with untouched candles. He went to the library and sat there till morning, absent-mindedly leafing through books and thinking, and was not disturbed by the phantom. Sir Henry had either slept through the apparition, or he had almost been deceived by the master of the house into playing the part of a ghost. The latter seemed more probable. The sense of a stranger's gaze that Sir Henry had experienced on his lonely walk was also explicable. It was possible that his host had been watching him, following him behind the wall in the secret corridor. If so, Mr. Kix must have been in league with Sir Maximilian, which was understandable. The clerk, fearing to lose a lucrative client, might well have devised the daring plan himself. Sir Henry was tormented by doubts. He was particularly offended by the fact that he liked the mansion very much. Mr. Kix, yawning desperately, found Sir Henry at 5 o'clock in the morning and asked in surprise, "Are you up already?" Sir Henry mumbled something unintelligible in reply. "Yesterday, Sir Maximilian had asked me to excuse him in advance for not seeing us off. He's a strange man, of course, but he's understandable. Age and living in the middle of nowhere would add to many people's peculiarities," Mr. Kix said. Sir Henry was silent. They left the house, got into the automobile, and drove away. In the mirror, Sir Henry saw the dark bulk of the mansion recede backward, disappear behind the trees, and become a black blur that quickly melted into the pre-dawn gloom. As he climbed the hill, Sir Henry slowed his speed to get a last glimpse of the house, but he could not see it.